Now, speaking of shocking, I don't know if you guys can really wrap your hands around this. I'm having a difficult time doing it myself. However, ladies and gentlemen, if you can believe it, back on the airwaves, on the Feel Good Show, assuming his rightful place as the station's resident program director. We just promoted you.
Thank you.
I should say you're kind of like our resident priest, but
Yeah, no. I'll be walking through the halls giving last rites if anyone's interested.
ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, Joe, would you like to become a priest? No.
Returning to the airwaves with a boom and a bang and a bong. It's the one and only T-Boz delivering to us words of wisdom and moments of meditation. Good morning, sir.
God, with an entrance like that, I feel like I should have 1,000 dancing girls in front of me.
You should.
God, how do I even? Maybe I should just say, good night, everyone. See you next week. How do you top that? I have no idea.
With strawberries and ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream, right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming in. Today's show is going to be completely different from everything I've done before. There's no script here. There's a takeaway, but it's from memory in my mind. There's no notes. I'm going to do something different. I'll tell you why. But before we get into that, there's a couple of disclaimers I want to get into. First of all, a lot of times, a lot of you hear me say, Lady Boz and I were at the car show, or we saw Marty Q, or we saw Jock Williams at Toho Lounge, and you're probably scratching your head going, wait a minute, you're blind. How could you be seeing car shows and seeing, Jock Williams? So my brother brought this to my attention, and he has the same eye disease that I have. And he says, you got to kind of clarify with people so they don't think that you're talking out of both sides of your head. So anyway, I have an eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. And basically, in layman's terms, if you remember your old Minolta camera from years ago, that lens that you screwed on, my lens is fine. But remember the film roll that went in the back of the camera? Well, my film roll is all deteriorated. There's just a little bit of film left. So when I say that Lady Boz and I went to the car show, what happens is, yes, I see the steering wheel in the car, but then I have to turn my head to see the seat and the rearview mirror, and it goes on from there. I don't see the whole car the way Jock does. I have what they call a 3-degree field of vision, where you boys and girls have 180-degree field of vision. I only have a 3-degree field of vision. So you say, but you do square dancing and you do contour dancing and you have your farm, and how do you do these things? Because you're only limited by your attitude. And because I've learned to navigate, negotiate, as my friend Catherine says, I'm differently abled. And my mother and father didn't raise a quitter. And so though I'm not going to be playing golf with John Ramsey and Jock Williams, but I can do other things. So I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't want to confuse anyone or people to think that I was just coming up with some story to enhance the show. So it's called retinitis pigmentosa. The film is deteriorated. The lens is fine, but we have to do things a little differently. Okay, so we got that off the hook. The other thing off the hook is I wasn't here last week. Yes, I had COVID. Okay, and if you could hear it in my voice, I sound a little bit like Marlon Brando. The voice is still a little raspy, but I feel fantastic. Thank you, Barbara, my brother and his wife, Lynn, Lady Boz, obviously, with the supplies she brought up, my daughter, Emily, and Storm stopping by. I had a wonderful support network because being visually impaired and not able to drive, it makes it kind of difficult when they tell you got to stay in the house for 5 days. So my support network, Stan, listened to me vent one night, great help there. So thank you. My friend Jim Boscarino called in to see how I was doing. So thank all of you for the wonderful support, because I could not have gotten through it on my own. Urgent care, great job. So there you go with all of that. I also want to say happy anniversary to Cuddy Boscarino and Selma Boscarino. Unfortunately, Cuddy is not with us anymore. But today, my friend Jim Boscarino, his parents got married in 1951. And so it's a 71st anniversary, and that marriage produced 4 wonderful men, boys in the beginning, but now they're men. And the third one in command, my friend Jim, has become my best friend, along with a bunch of other good guys like Fred and Stan and the rest of them. So I know Selma is looking up, and I know Cuddy is smiling down, and we applaud the wonderful thing of marriage. And that is going to take us into our topic. But before we do, I got to say, Jock, that the couch is pretty full today. We had 2 guests on in the 10 o'clock hour, and Ed McMahon is sitting on the floor, Jock. There's no room on the couch. I barely fit here today. Wonderful show.
We can order some accommodations for you. We'll take care of that. I think
you got to get a wingback chair or something in here, Jock, because there's just so many people on the show. John Ramsey is sitting on the floor next to Ed McMahon. It's incredible. So everyone, grab your towels and your chairs. We're outdoors today. If you notice, when you came to Co Memorial Park, there were no pads and pens. So there's a reason for that. I'm going to tell you that in a minute. There are no notes to take. I just want you not to have an open book, but an open heart. I don't want you to have an open book, but an open mind. And I want you just to listen to stories today. Someone said to me, Boz, you're not a motivational speaker. You're not an inspirational speaker. You're a great storyteller. And that's what I do. I tell stories that touch people's lives. And if those stories open up their minds to new things, great. If their stories help them heal with pain in the past, that's great. If those stories give them a little motivation to try something new, that's great. So today is going to be stories. And so that's why I want everyone to sit in a circle, not in classroom form the way we always do. Yeah, Barbara, bring your chair around. Stan, okay? Jim, bring your blanket over here. Everybody in a round circle over here. Unfortunately, Jock has to stay in the studio. But everybody wave to Jock. But beautiful, beautiful here in Co Memorial Park in downtown Torrington. What I'm going to talk about today is not only is it Jim's parents' anniversary, but today would have been my 38th wedding anniversary. And so I thought for today, I would share some stories about my late wife, the reason why I married her and the impact she made on myself and my children, and talk a little bit about our life together today. It's not really a topic, boys and girls, it's a theme. And so we're going to do a little bit about marriage, the sanctity of marriage, using my marriage as a background. And some of the stories you may be able to relate to, some you may not. That's fine. If some of you don't like this type of programming, you can turn the knob. We don't care. Jock and I will be more than happy to have you back next week. I did have a topic this week, which was going to be self-talk, how we talk to ourselves. That's all written out. That show was all produced. But when I saw that today was the 15th of September, the Holy Spirit said, Boz, put the talk away and just talk from yourself. And that's what I'm going to do. 38 years ago today, I was standing in a building, and this woman in white was coming towards me. And she was holding her father's arm up close, because my father-in-law was riddled with cancer, and he could barely walk. And he was going to have to use crutches. But he said, damn it, I'm a World War II vet. I will walk you down that aisle. So in the back of the church, my father-in-law, John Rogers, said to Lori, are you ready? He was a man of few words, just like my late wife was. And she said, yes, Dad, I'm ready. And here's the ticket. Listen, boys and girls. And she said to him, and I got you. And so if you look in the picture of the wedding album, she does not have her arm through his arm as a traditional father-daughter. She was holding him up because she was strong and she had strength. And she literally carried her father down the aisle where I was. And it was that strength that my late wife had. It was that figured out spirit is what drew me to her. She wasn't college educated. She never graduated high school. But she was strong. Very strong. Ask my kids. And when her father let go of her, he had to grab his wife, my mother-in-law, and go sit. And so, as she carried him, she carried me. Her strength was unyielding. I have 3 stories I'm going to start with called snow stories. Yes, snow, the white stuff that falls from the sky. Many years ago, my sister was only about 18 years old, and she had a boyfriend named Andy, and he lived in Ansonia, and we lived in Huntington, Connecticut. Some of you know it as Shelton, but we lived in the nice section, which was Huntington. My parents had a business. And so anyway, so my sister wanted to go see Andy, her boyfriend, but it was snowing. You know that kind of snow where you can't see anything but like a white sheet? And so my mother said to Dina, you're not going to go see Andy today. Oh, I want to see Andy. I want to see Andy. So Lori was there. She was only about 19 at the time, 20. And she said to Dina, I'll take you if your mother doesn't mind. My mother said, are you kidding? It's snowing. My sister told me this story. She remembered I was doing something. I wasn't actually there at the time. And so Lori said to Dina, I'll take you. So my mother said, if you can do it, go ahead. So they got in the car. It was an 83 Mustang that she bought with her own money. Actually, my late wife bought her family their first TV set for $300. They only had a black and white TV, but when she went to work, her big gift for their Christmas that year, I think it was 1973 or something, they never had a color TV until she bought them one. That strength. So my sister and her got in the car, and they started out. And my sister said, the snow was coming down like unbelievable. The car was swerving. And my sister looked at her and said, I never met a woman like this. She said, this girl is barely 20 years old, and her strength and her fortitude and her confidence. And from Huntington to Ansonia was well over a half an hour. And she drove that car. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. Nothing. And she got my sister to Andy's house. My sister kept saying, you know, my mother's a strong-willed person. I'm pretty self-confident, but not like her. She is unbelievable. She's just, cars are going, trucks, snow's flying all over the place. Not a whimper, not a word, no show of fear, no show of weakness. She drove that car, got my sister to Andy's, and then she got back. Snow story number 2, we went down to Trumbull one Christmas to my brother-in-law George's house. And while we were there was a report of a huge storm coming in again, another huge snowstorm. This is in the 90s. My kids were little. And so word came through the house, everyone saying, you know, you guys better go back to Torrington because this thing is bad. This is like a perfect storm coming right at us. So we had a minivan, a red minivan. So we got in the minivan and we start out. Now we're going up Route 8 and the snow was falling. And the snow was falling. And she's driving. Obviously, I can't drive. And the kids are in the back. Jingle bells, Frosty the Snowman. And the snow is falling. And the windshield wipers. But they're not doing anything because the snow is just covering the windshield. And we're driving. We get past Watertown. Now it's getting dark. You can't see anything. The kids are in the back. Jingle bells, Frosty the Snowman. And she's looking straight ahead. I'm looking at her. Not a word. Not a flicker. Nothing. We can't see anything. The car is swerving. The car is moving. We keep undaunted. The only sign I saw was, by the grace of God, Litchfield, exit 42. We kept driving. The windshield wipers. The snow. There's no trucks. There's no one on the road. There's no cops. The snow is all the way up to the wheel wells. There is no way we can turn back. There's no way we can pull over. We finally get to Turner Ave in Torrington, where we were renting at the time. We weren't over here where I am now. We pull in, go in the garage. The kids get out. Jingle bells, Frosty the Snowman. They run in the house all happy Christmas Day with their grandmother and their family. And I looked at her and I said, wow, that was some pretty good driving. She said, the next time there's a storm coming in, don't you let me drive down to Trumbull. I said, why? You did such a great job. You did fine. She says, I was scared out of my ass. I said, you were? She says, yes, I was. She goes, I didn't even know where we were half the time. I didn't even see the road. I just held on to that steering wheel. I said, well, why didn't you say anything? Here's what I want you to listen, everybody. I said to her, why didn't you say anything? She said, because if the kids knew I was scared, then they would be scared. So I didn't want my children to be scared. They knew you couldn't drive. My friends, when it says in Scripture, one lays down his life for another, they're not talking about standing in front of a speeding bullet. They're talking about what Lori did. She held in her fear, her anxiety, her worry. Why? For the benefit of her children. That's motherhood. That's the woman I married. I want to go to the break, Jock, and then we're going to go to the next story. Go ahead, Jock.
Thank you so much, T-Boz, and we want to recognize and thank our sponsors for allowing us to bring you the quality community radio programming that we're able to do at this time. I want to give a big, huge shout-out to the Nutmeg Conservatory for the Arts, Torrington Savings Bank, TDI, Torrington Distributors Incorporated, and Charlotte Hungerford Hospital. Thank you so much for helping WAPJ celebrate 25 years of broadcast service to the Torrington community and now beyond. And we'll return to T-Boz with words of wisdom and moments of meditation.
Thank you, Jock. Many years later, snow story number 3, the last one. My daughter Rachel was getting a truck that we were buying her thanks to my parents. And it was in Watertown. And it was snowing again. And Lori wanted to give the deposit of $1,000 to the car place we were buying the truck. And it was a very heavy snowstorm. And I said to her, why don't we just wait? She goes, no, I don't want her to lose that truck. It's such a good truck. It's a good quality truck. It was a Ford Ranger with side panels. I want her to have it. I want to get there. Now, you got to realize, folks, there's no internet, take a picture of a check and mail it back then. All right. So some of you younger people saying, well, why didn't you just take a picture of the check? That wasn't available then. So I said, well, you're crazy. I said, it's snowing. She goes, that's okay. We had a Nissan Sentra. We'll get there. So, all right. So we get in the car. Rachel's in the front with her mother. I'm in the back, like a little beanie on my head because I can't drive. Right. And so we start out. And again, the snow was coming down. We got to go to Watertown. And the car is swerving and we're going. So finally we come to this hill, almost a mountain. And it's straight up in front of us, and it's all white along with the snow. The car is covered. Again, there's nobody on the street. The guy said we could have brought the check the next day, but not her. She wanted to make sure she didn't lose that truck. So Rachel looked at her mother and said, Ma, you're not going to make it up that hill. My late wife looked at her daughter. She dropped that thing into low 1. She hit the gas. The car went up. It swerved. It swerved some more. It went up a little more. It swerved. The windshield wiper was up again. I'm in the back holding on. The car's swerving. Rachel's looking at me. She's looking at her mother. The car is swerving. It's swerving. It's swerving. And finally, boom, we get right to the top of the hill. Puts the thing in the park. She looks at her daughter. Rachel says, sorry, Mom. She never said a word to her daughter. And she looked straight ahead. And we brought the check to the truck and got home. My wife didn't have to say a lot of words. She just produced it. When Rachel said to her, you ain't going to make it up this hill, I had a feeling that was not the right thing to say. Here's my favorite story, one of my favorite stories. It's called The Cage. Many years ago, my brother and his wife were having company, and their name was Scott and Annie. And my brother and his wife, Lynn, and Scott and Annie all owned birds. They had a big parrot. My brother had a parakeet. And we had a wonderful dinner party at Lindley Street. We lived upstairs. It was a 2-family house. My brother and his wife lived downstairs. They're still there today in that beautiful home. And what a beautiful job they've done with it. But anyway, so we're having this beautiful London broiled dinner or something. And I'm eating. I'm happy as a clam. And my brother and his wife and Scott and Annie are chatting for over an hour about parakeets and bird ownership and the fun of it. And I'm just sitting there. I don't say a word because guess what, boys and girls? I don't own a bird. And they're talking and talking and talking. So the rest of the night, we get back to other things. We have a wonderful, we're all early married couples. So this is probably 1986. And so anyway, then the next day I go to work. A couple of days later, I come home from work. And Lori says to me, "Come here, I want to show you something." I said, "Okay." So I followed her. We had a nice 6-room apartment, and one of the bedrooms was our little TV room. My sister-in-law is nodding right now. So we go into the little TV room, and there's this huge bird cage, huge, on a stand with a big stick, and it's got that bell and all the treat cups and the whole thing, and there's a parakeet in there. And I look at her, and I said, what is this? Not my birthday. It's not our anniversary. What do you do? What is this? Now listen, boys and girls, open your heart and your mind, because there's a scripture verse that's going to get attached to this in about 10 seconds. She looked at me, and I said to her, "You don't even like birds." She looked at me, and she said, "The other night," now listen, everyone, "the other night I felt that you, Tommy, were left out at dinner conversation. So I went and I got this for you, so that when they come back next time, you, Tommy, will have something to talk about. You, Tommy, will have something to talk about." My friends, when it says in Scripture, "Wives, be submissive to your husbands," I know all the Helen Reddy people just turn the radio on. What they're talking about is what Lori did. Submission in the Bible, you guys don't understand. Submission means to understand your husband and to love him and to know his depth. And so she, again, put herself aside. It wasn't easy. She had to put that bird in the cage. It was flapping around. "I got this for you because I felt you were left out of the dinner conversation. So when they come back, you will be able to talk about something." That's what it means in Scripture when it says, "Wives, don't be submissive to your husband." All the Helen Reddy people got their nose out of joint. But if you read further in Paul's letter, it also says to the men, we got 2 things we got to do. And it says, "Husbands, love your wives like Jesus loved the church." Jesus died for the church. Are we man enough for our submissive wives to die to the cell phone for an hour, to die to the football game we want to watch because she'd rather go out to Sharon and pick apples? Are we going to die to the business call that we know we got to make instead of sitting down and listening to her? That's what we got. Then the one end of that says, "Fathers, do not nag your children because they will lose heart." So the women have one thing to make a better marriage, but we got 2. In your marriage, boys and girls, make time. Don't find the time. For my anniversary today, you know what? The flowers are going to a grave. Find the time. Don't make the time. Because you know what? The time will never come. Make the time. Don't find the time. Because if you find the time, it never happens. Someday is not a date on the calendar. You got to make that time with that woman that you love. You got to make that time for her. You got to make that time. Wives, be submissive to your husbands. That's what it means. I got the bird cage and the bird so you would have something to talk about. That's what I was married to, boys and girls. And it started today. 2 more quick stories, and we're going to get to the wrap up here. You know, when Lori died, my friend Emily has a friend, Sarah, childhood friend. And over Lori's dead body, she was between me and Sarah in the hospital, Charlotte Hungerford. Sarah looked at me and she said, "You know, Mr. Bozzi, the reason why I'm getting married?" I said, "Why, Sarah?" She said, "Because of the marriage that you and Mrs. Bozzi had." Boom. If you're not inspiring in your marriage someone else to get married, you need to rethink it. Marriage is a union of love, not codependency. Most marriages are codependent. They say the loneliest place for a woman in the United States is in a marriage. You guys need to look a little bit. You're the head of household. The reason why I'm getting married, Mr. Bozzi, is because the marriage, this is a young 20-year-old person, because of the marriage that you and Mrs. Bozzi had. After Lori died, my friend Karen in 4-H came to me and she said, I never said this to you before, but all of us in the dairy barn wanted what you had. We didn't have any money. I said, what did you want, Karen? She said, when Lori would come up in the morning with coffee and donuts for you and Rachel and everybody else, after the cows were washed and all bedded and all that, she said, the look that you two had for each other, she said, none of us had that look that you two shared. If you're married, thinking about getting married, or you're in a relationship, if people aren't telling you that, you need to reinvest your time and your efforts. That's what marriage is. Father Jim Sullivan said to me that 50% of marriages end up in divorce. Of the 50 that are left, 35 are just clocking time, and 15 see heaven. And he said, that's what you had. When Rachel was going to the prom, Justin needed a tuxedo. Lori paid for it. It was $90. I said, where did you get your... I said, why didn't you talk to his father? She said, no. She said, I wanted him to have that tuxedo. I wanted them to look nice. I took care of it. And then years later, when Emily was getting married to Alan, first husband anyway, they wanted it at the Curtis house. My wife had an oxygen tank and oxygen in her nose, and she said, I'll give $100 deposit. I'm looking at her going, where are you getting $100? And the guy said, Mrs. Bozzi, we don't need any money. We'll hold it. She goes, I don't want them to lose this place. She never said to Alan, does your mother have $50? Does your father have $75? Does your No, I want them to have this place. I'll give you a check right now for $100. She taught my daughters the 3 best words you could ever hear. Figure it out. Figure it out. Some of us married people are spending way too much time with our children and way too much time with our grandchildren, and we're not spending time with the people that we got in the game. Some of you need to tell your kids and grandchildren to figure it out. My kids figure it out. Rachel had an episode with Jackson a few weeks ago. She was very sick. The baby was sick. There's no mommy to call. Dad is disabled. You know what they do? They figure it out. It was the best lesson she ever taught them. The last story I wanted to get into something else, but that's going to have to wait for another appropriate day. The last story is in 1985, Lori and I went to Italy. Now, she was not Italian. She was Swedish, English, and Irish descent, mainly Swedish. Excuse me, her mother's name was Peterson. Her maiden name was Rogers. So we go to Italy, right? Probably the most beautiful country in Europe, even though I'm Italian descent. I mean, you have Michelangelo's David. You have the Colosseum. You have all of the beautiful art and the architecture and Rome and Pompeii and Venice and Florence, otherwise known as Firenze, and Milano. And you have all this beautiful, beautiful architecture and art. It's the art capital of the world. I said to her on the last day of the trip, my sister-in-law Lynn is nodding, she knows the story. I said, during the last day of the trip, I said, hon, what was your favorite part of the trip? She said, the people. The people. So in other words, rather than see the beauty that God had created through man, she saw the beauty in God's greatest creation, man himself. The people. She could have said anything, and I would have been fine with it. But here she was, 26 years old, not Italian descent. She saw the most beautiful country in the world, and the thing that struck her the most was the people. And she built a career at Benchmark, loving people. Loving people. When I met her, I was playing in a band with my brothers called the Bozzi Brothers. Her birthday is 3/16, John's famous gospel. And when John describes Jesus' crucifixion, he says, there's Jesus with one thief on his left and the other on the right, and Jesus in the middle. Well, of course, Jesus in the middle. If one's on the left, one's on the right, Jesus in the middle. But John draws his attention, our attention to that. What's ironic is when I met Lori for the first time at the Hi Ho Lounge. Her birthday is 3/16, right? John. She was sitting at a table. Her sister Gail was on the right. Her sister Pamela was on the left. And Lori was in the middle. Boom. 3/16. God so loved the world, and she so loved us. Her 2 daughters and me. She loved us so much. That's all she lived for. My 38th anniversary is solo. But if you're out there, my friends, you're married, understand this. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. Run as to win. What's ironic about 9/24, that's the day we came home from our honeymoon. Run as to win. If you're about to get married, run as to win. If you've been married 2 years, run as to win. If you're married 10 years, run as to win. If you're married 47 years, like Veronica would have been, I'd like to tell that story one day. Run as to win. Run as to win. Marriage is a wonderful, wonderful institution. The Boscarinos are a great example of that. Their legacy is their children. My late wife's legacy is her children in Jackson. Run as to win. Paul tells the Corinthians, run as to win, not to limp along, do your best, see what you can do. Run as to win. Win not a prize in the sense of a trophy, but the love and the admiration that you have. We ran as to win, but we only ran for 31 years. Some of you still have your spouse there. Run as to win. Spend the time with the guy or the girl that you got into the game with. Run as to win. Win the heart of the person you said many years ago, till death do us part. My friends, this was a little different for me, but it's something I wanted to do. I hope some of you took something away. Maybe you just enjoyed the stories, but it was good for me to do. Jock, I wanted to go into the song, but as Jock instructed me to be too much stuff to do on his end to do that. So Jock is going to do his little close. And listen to the song, boys and girls. Listen to the song at the end. It's not what you're expecting. Jock, go ahead.
Well, as always, T-Boz, you bring the pain. And, relationships are probably one of the most difficult things to navigate in our lives besides, mortgage and car payments. But, when you do find the right one, you will see that it will enhance and enlighten your life more than you can ever possibly imagine. Now, I'm speaking from a perspective where I'm still single and, things happen. And sometimes we do have those issues that sometimes prohibit us from having the relationship that God meant us to have. But it doesn't mean that God still isn't looking out for us and trying to prod us in the right direction. We just have to be open to that and, try to proceed accordingly. But I think you raised some great points in terms of how we are to conduct ourselves once we do find ourselves in that relationship where it seems to be the right one. I think it's ironic, too, that in the last hour of the show, when I was speaking with William Commodore from Minnesota, his book, Transformation, talks specifically about domestic violence and domestic abuse and facing that and understanding that and accepting the fact that sometimes you are responsible for your actions. So I think taking that healthy, reflective look inwardly and having that conversation with the power that is, if you believe in that, will definitely bode well for anyone that travels that road.
You're absolutely right, Jock. And hang on, because I always say some guys can't find one, and God sent me two. And the relationship that I'm in today with Veronica would never have happened without the first relationship I had with my late wife, even she had with Tim.